The corporate world teaches you many things, but the most valuable lesson is this: never trust anyone who smiles too much at company parties. I learned this the hard way on a Tuesday night in Manhattan, watching my wife Emily kiss my former assistant Lucas in front of half the financial district's elite. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Buster Hamilton, and at 45, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal the business world could offer. Hostile takeovers, backstabbing colleagues, clients who'd sell their mothers for a better interest rate. But nothing prepared me for the sight of my Instagram-famous wife making out with my 28-year-old protégé at our company's annual Gatsby Night celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here we were, dressed like characters from a story about moral decay and empty excess, and my life was imitating art in the worst possible way. "Life with Buster is so boring," Emily announced to the crowd, her gin-soaked voice carrying across the marble floors of the Meridian Tower's penthouse event space. "I need a new lover." The room fell silent. 200 guests in their finest 20s attire stopped mid-conversation. Even the jazz band seemed to miss a beat. Emily, resplendent in a beaded gold dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, grabbed Lucas by his perfectly styled hair and planted a kiss on him that would have made a porn director blush. If humiliation was currency, I'd have been a billionaire in that moment. But instead of exploding, instead of making a scene that would have satisfied Emily's desperate need for drama, I did something that surprised even me. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Lucas, dressed in a rented tuxedo that I'd probably end up paying for through some creative expense report, seemed to be enjoying his moment in the spotlight. His hands wandered places they had no business going, especially not in public, and definitely not on my wife. "Jesus Christ, Buster," whispered Janine Morrison, my oldest friend and the only person in the room who seemed as mortified as I should have been. "Are you going to do something?" "I am doing something," I replied, keeping my voice steady as I captured every second of Emily's performance. "I'm documenting evidence." The crowd began to murmur. Some pulled out their own phones. Others looked away in embarrassment. My boss, Richard Steinberg, looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest table. My rival, Victor Castellanos, wore a smirk that suggested he was already planning how to use this against me. Emily finally came up for air, her lipstick smeared across Lucas's face like a crime scene. She looked around the room with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just won a game nobody else knew they were playing. "What?" she said, addressing the stunned faces around her. "It's not like it's a secret. Lucas has been taking care of my needs while Buster's been busy with his spreadsheets." Lucas, to his credit, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. His face had gone pale beneath his spray tan, and he kept glancing at me like a deer caught in headlights. "Emily," he whispered, tugging at her arm. "Maybe we should—" "Should what?" she interrupted, her voice getting louder. "Should pretend that my husband isn't a boring old man who hasn't touched me in months? Should pretend that you haven't been sneaking into our penthouse every afternoon while he's at work?" The murmurs grew louder. I caught sight of Lydia Chen, Emily's PR manager, frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to do damage control. Too late for that, I thought. I stopped recording and slipped my phone back into my jacket pocket. Emily was still talking, but I'd heard enough. Lucas was shifting from foot to foot like a guilty child, and the crowd was starting to disperse, conversations buzzing with gossip that would fuel Manhattan's social circles for weeks. "Lucas," I said, my voice cutting through Emily's continued rambling. The room fell silent again. "I need to see you in my office, first thing tomorrow morning." Emily laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What are you going to do, fire him? He doesn't work for you anymore, remember? He works for me now." I smiled then, The kind of smile that had made me successful in a business where nice guys finished last. We'll see about that. The party continued around us, but the damage was done. Emily had gotten her drama, Lucas had gotten his 15 minutes of fame, and I had gotten something far more valuable: clarity. As I walked toward the exit, Janine caught up with me. "Buster, wait. Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "I have some phone calls to make." "What kind of phone calls?" I paused at the elevator, watching the numbers climb as it rose to meet us. The kind that are going to make tomorrow very interesting. Behind us, I could hear Emily's laughter echoing through the penthouse, shrill and victorious. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd humiliated me beyond recovery. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. My office occupied the corner of the 32nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of Central Park. It was designed to intimidate, and on Wednesday morning at 8:30 sharp, it was working perfectly on Lucas. He sat across from my mahogany desk, fidgeting with his cufflinks and avoiding eye contact. Gone was the confident young man who'd been groping my wife 12 hours earlier. In his place sat a nervous kid who was finally beginning to understand the consequences of his actions. "Close the door," I said without looking up from my computer screen. Lucas complied, his hands shaking slightly as he turned the handle. When he returned to his seat, I finally acknowledged his presence. "Interesting party last night," I began, my voice conversational. "Did you enjoy yourself?" "Mr. Hamilton, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But first, let me show you something." I turned my laptop around so he could see the screen. The video from the previous night played in high definition, capturing every detail of his performance with Emily. His face went white as he watched himself betray the man who'd mentored him, promoted him, and trusted him with increasingly important responsibilities. 43 million views and counting, I said, pausing the video at a particularly compromising moment. Lydia posted it on Emily's Instagram account at midnight. Something about living authentically and following your heart. Very touching. Lucas's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We didn't... She said you two were getting divorced anyway. Did she now? I leaned back in my leather chair, studying his face. And you believed that gave you permission to be with my wife in my bed, using the key I gave you for emergencies? He flinched at my language. Lucas had always been squeamish about confrontation, which made his current predicament particularly amusing. It wasn't like that, he stammered. Emily said, I don't care what Emily said. I closed the laptop and stood up, walking to the window. What I care about is that my assistant, whom I trusted with confidential client information and access to my personal life, decided to betray that trust in the most spectacular way possible. I turned back to face him. You're fired, Lucas. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. Your final paycheck will reflect the return of the company credit card you've been using for your little romantic adventures. The charges at the Plaza Hotel, the jewelry from Tiffany's, the weekend in the Hamptons, all of it comes out of your severance. Lucas shot to his feet, his face flushing red. You can't do this. Emily will what? I interrupted. Emily doesn't work here anymore either. As of this morning, her contract as our brand ambassador has been terminated for gross misconduct. The board was quite understanding when I showed them the video. The color drained from his face again. But she needs that income. The penthouse, her lifestyle. Should have thought of that before you decided to humiliate me in front of 200 of my colleagues and clients. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Security to the 32nd floor, please. We have someone who needs an escort to the lobby. Lucas stood there, mouth agape, as the reality of his situation sank in. Emily's brand ambassador contract had been worth $200,000 a year, plus expenses. It was what allowed her to maintain her lifestyle of designer clothes, expensive lunches, and constant social media content creation. This is insane, he said, his voice cracking. You're destroying people's lives over one mistake. One mistake? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lucas, you've been sleeping with my wife for 3 months. You used my credit card to buy her jewelry. You took her to hotels on company time. You gave her inside information about our clients that she used for her social media content. This wasn't one mistake. It was a sustained campaign of betrayal. The security guards arrived, 2 large men in dark suits who'd escorted plenty of terminated employees over the years. They waited politely by the door while Lucas gathered what little dignity he had left. Emily won't stand for this, he said, making one last attempt at defiance. She has lawyers. She has influence. Emily has a prenuptial agreement that includes a very specific infidelity clause, I replied. She also has about 3 hours before the gossip blogs pick up the story. I'd suggest she start looking for a good publicist. As the security guards led Lucas away, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. The first domino had fallen, and the others would follow in rapid succession. I picked up my phone and dialed Janine's number. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. "Like clockwork. Is your contact at page 6 ready?" "She's been waiting for your call all morning. This is going to be bigger than the mayor's sex scandal." "Good. Send her the full video file, plus the hotel receipts and credit card statements. I want everything documented." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Buster, are you sure about this? Once this goes public, there's no going back." I looked out at the city sprawling below me, thinking about Emily's laughter from the night before, about Lucas's hands on her body, about the smug satisfaction on Victor's face as he watched my humiliation. There was no going back the moment she decided to destroy our marriage for Instagram likes, I said. Now we're just evening the score. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long moment, savoring the quiet. My phone buzzed with a text message from Emily. "What did you do to Lucas? He's not answering his phone." I typed back, "Ask him when security finishes escorting him out of the building." Her response came immediately. "You bastard! This isn't over." I smiled as I typed my final message. "You're absolutely right. It's just getting started." The boardroom at Meridian Financial was designed to intimidate. 20 feet of polished mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than most cars, and a view of Manhattan that reminded everyone present exactly how much money was at stake in every decision. By Thursday morning, I was sitting at that table facing 5 of the most powerful people in the financial district, and every one of them had seen the video of my wife's public betrayal. Victor Castellanos sat directly across from me, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit impeccable as always. At 50, he'd been angling for my position as senior vice president for years, and he clearly saw this scandal as his opportunity. "Gentlemen," Victor began, addressing the board members while pointedly ignoring me, "I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room. The events of Tuesday night have created a significant public relations problem for this firm." Richard Steinberg, our CEO, looked uncomfortable. "Victor, I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum. With all due respect, Richard, when one of our senior executives becomes a laughingstock on social media, it absolutely becomes our business." Victor pulled out his tablet and swiped to what I assumed was the viral video. 43 million views and counting. The comments are less than flattering to our corporate image. Board member Patricia Wells nodded gravely. The Hartwell Foundation has already called to express concerns about their account. They're questioning whether we can maintain the discretion they require. I'd been silent through this opening salvo, but now I leaned forward slightly. "Are you suggesting that I'm somehow responsible for my wife's behavior?" Victor's smile was razor-thin. "I'm suggesting that a man who can't control his own household might not be the best choice to manage our highest-profile clients." "Interesting perspective," I replied, reaching into my briefcase. "Tell me, Victor, what's your opinion on employees who use company resources for personal gain?" His smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you're implying. I placed a thick folder on the table. Lucas Morrison's expense reports for the past 3 months, hotel charges, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, all approved by someone with senior-level authorization codes. Patricia opened the folder and began flipping through the pages. Her eyebrows rose steadily as she read. These charges total over $30,000, she said, and they're all personal expenses. Approved by whom? Asked Thomas Chen, our chief financial officer. I pretended to consult my notes. The authorization codes trace back to someone who wanted to ensure that Lucas had everything he needed to keep my wife happy. Someone who thought that a distracted, humiliated Buster Hamilton would be easier to push aside. Victor's face had gone pale. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime, I replied. Fortunately, I'm more interested in cleaning house than pressing charges. Richard leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Buster? I'm proposing that we acknowledge what really happened here. My marriage imploded in spectacular fashion, yes, but it imploded because certain people saw an opportunity to use my personal life against me professionally. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where Lucas was probably wandering around with his belongings in a cardboard box. Emily's contract has been terminated for cause. Lucas has been fired for misuse of company funds and breach of confidentiality. The only question remaining is whether we're going to let this distract us from the business of making money. Thomas was still examining the expense reports. These hotel charges, the Plaza, the St. Regis, these are all dates when you were out of town on business, Buster. Convenient timing, I agreed. Almost like someone was providing my schedule to interested parties. Victor finally found his voice. You're suggesting I was involved in some kind of conspiracy? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. The authorization codes are in your name, Victor. The timing coincides with your increased interest in my accounts. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you've already prepared a presentation for the board about restructuring my department. The silence that followed was deafening. Victor's carefully constructed ambush had turned into his own execution. Perhaps, Richard said slowly, we should table any discussion of departmental changes until we've conducted a full audit of recent expense authorizations. Victor's political instincts finally kicked in. Of course. I want to be completely transparent about any irregularities. Excellent, I said, returning to my seat. In the meantime, I'll be taking a long weekend to deal with my personal affairs. When I return on Monday, I expect this matter to be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. As the meeting broke up, Victor lingered behind. When we were alone, he leaned across the table. You think you're very clever, he said quietly. But this isn't over. I gathered my papers and smiled. You're absolutely right, Victor. It's not over. It's just beginning. That afternoon, while Victor was presumably trying to figure out how to explain $30,000 in questionable expenses, I was at my gym working out my frustrations on a heavy bag. The Meridian Athletic Club was where Manhattan's elite came to stay in shape and make deals away from their offices. It was also where Lucas had been coming every day at 2 p.m., using the guest privileges I'd extended to him as my assistant. I was in the middle of my workout when he walked in, apparently unaware that his privileges had been revoked along with his employment. He was wearing expensive workout gear, probably bought with my company credit card, and had the kind of artificial confidence that comes from desperation. Buster, he said, approaching my corner of the gym. We need to talk. I continued hitting the heavy bag, each punch landing with satisfying force. I don't think we do, Lucas. In fact, I'm pretty sure you're trespassing. Emily's falling apart, he said, ignoring my comment. She's been crying for 2 days straight. The media is destroying her. And maybe we can work something out. Call off the dogs. I'll disappear, leave town, whatever you want. I stopped hitting the bag and turned to face him. Several other gym members had noticed our conversation and were pretending not to listen while they worked out nearby. "What I want," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You wanted to play with fire, Lucas. Now you're burned." His face flushed red. "You're destroying innocent people's lives." "Innocent?" I laughed, and several heads turned in our direction. "You spent 3 months being with my wife in my bed, using my money to buy her gifts, and lying to my face every single day. Which part of that sounds innocent to you?" Lucas looked around nervously as more people stopped their workouts to watch our confrontation. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Embarrassed?" I grabbed a towel from the bench and snapped it at him like we were in a high school locker room. "You should spend less time bench pressing my wife and more time looking for a job." The towel caught him across the face, and he stumbled backward into a rack of weights. The crash echoed through the gym, and now everyone was staring openly. "You're insane," Lucas said, his voice cracking. I picked up his water bottle, some expensive protein shake that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries, and poured it slowly onto the floor. "What I am," I said, watching the brown liquid spread across the polished concrete, "is done with you. Security will be here in about 30 seconds to escort you out. I'd suggest you use that time to think about whether you want to leave quietly or make this even more embarrassing for yourself." Sure enough, 2 security guards appeared at the gym entrance. Lucas looked around the room at the dozens of faces watching his humiliation, then back at me. "Emily won't stand for this," he said, making one last attempt at defiance. "Emily can't even stand for herself right now," I replied. "Something about losing her income, her reputation, and her boy toy all in the same week." As security escorted Lucas out, I returned to my workout. Around me, conversations gradually resumed, but I caught more than a few approving nods from other members. My phone buzzed with a text from Janine. "Page 6 just published the full story. Emily's trending on Twitter and it's not good." I smiled as I landed another solid punch on the heavy bag. The second domino had fallen. By Friday morning, Emily's world had collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. I was sitting in my lawyer's office, reviewing divorce papers, when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Emily was having a very public meltdown, and the internet was loving every second of it. "The prenuptial agreement is quite clear," said Margaret Foster, my attorney for the past 15 years. "The infidelity clause voids her claim to spousal support and limits her to whatever assets she brought into the marriage." Which was essentially nothing, I noted, scrolling through the latest batch of memes featuring Emily's face photoshopped onto various crying celebrities. Correct. Her Instagram account, her personal belongings, and the car you bought her, which technically belongs to the company, so she'll need to return that as well. Margaret was 65 years old, sharp as a razor, and had handled more high-profile divorces than anyone else in Manhattan. She'd seen every dirty trick in the book, but even she seemed impressed by the thoroughness of Emily's self-destruction. "The media attention is actually working in your favor," she continued. "It's going to be very difficult for her to claim she was the wronged party when there's video evidence of her public infidelity." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from Emily herself, filmed in what looked like a cheap hotel room. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and she was holding what appeared to be a bottle of wine. "Buster, you bastard," she slurred into the camera. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. I have friends. I have connections. I'll destroy you." The video had already been viewed 50,000 times and was climbing rapidly. The comments were brutal. "She's not handling this well," Margaret observed, watching over my shoulder. "No, she's not." What Emily didn't understand was that her friends and connections were all people who'd benefited from her association with me. The moment that association became a liability, they dropped her faster than a hot potato. Her PR manager, Lydia, had issued a statement distancing herself from Emily's recent erratic behavior. The brands that had sponsored her content were quietly removing her posts from their social media accounts. Even her closest girlfriends were suddenly too busy to return her calls. "There's something else," Margaret said, pulling out another folder. "I had my investigator look into Lucas Morrison's background. Turns out your wife wasn't his first married target." She handed me a series of photographs showing Lucas with various older women at expensive restaurants and hotels. Each woman was well-dressed, clearly wealthy, and obviously smitten with her young companion. "He's got quite a pattern," Margaret continued. 3 previous relationships with married women, all of whom ended up divorced and financially devastated. He's basically a professional homewrecker. I studied the photos, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. Emily had thought she was so clever, so sophisticated, choosing a younger lover to spice up her boring life. In reality, she'd been just another mark in Lucas's long con. "Does Emily know about this?" "Not yet, but she's about to." Margaret's investigator had been thorough. Lucas had used the same playbook each time: target a wealthy, bored housewife, seduce her with attention and flattery, encourage her to leave her husband, then disappear once the divorce was finalized and the money was gone. "I want copies of everything sent to Emily's hotel," I said. "Let her see exactly what kind of man she destroyed her marriage for." That afternoon, I drove to Emily's temporary residence, a mid-tier hotel in Queens that was about as far from our former penthouse lifestyle as you could get while still being in New York City. She'd been forced to move there after I'd changed the locks on our apartment and frozen the joint credit cards. I found her in the hotel bar, drunk and disheveled, trying to convince a gossip blogger to write a sympathetic piece about her situation. The blogger looked bored and kept checking her phone. "Buster!" Emily called out when she saw me, her voice loud enough to draw stares from other patrons. "Come to gloat?" "Just came to drop something off," I said, placing the envelope of photographs on the table between her and the blogger. Emily opened it with shaking hands. Her face went through a series of expressions as she flipped through the images: confusion, recognition, and finally, devastating comprehension. "What is this?" she whispered. "Lucas's resume," I replied. "Turns out you weren't special after all. Just another wealthy wife in a long line of marks." The gossip blogger perked up, sensing a new angle to the story. She leaned forward to get a better look at the photographs. "Oh my God," Emily said, her voice breaking. "He told me I was different. He said he'd never felt this way before." "I'm sure he did. Same line he used on Mrs. Patterson in Connecticut, Mrs. Rodriguez in New Jersey, and Mrs. Kim in Westchester. All divorced now, by the way. All broke." Emily started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. The blogger was taking notes furiously, probably already composing her headline. "Cheating Instagram wife discovers she was just another mark." "Where is he now?" Emily asked through her tears. "Gone. Disappeared Tuesday night after security escorted him out. His apartment is empty, his phone is disconnected, and his bank account is closed. Classic exit strategy." I stood up to leave, but Emily grabbed my arm. "Please, Buster. I made a mistake. I was stupid and selfish, but I never meant for it to go this far." "You made a choice, Emily. You chose to humiliate me in public, destroy our marriage, and throw away everything we built together for a man who was using you from day one. I can make it right," she pleaded. "We can work through this." I looked down at her, this woman who'd shared my life for 8 years, who'd once been beautiful and confident and full of dreams. Now she was just another cautionary tale about the price of betrayal. "No, Emily, we can't. Some things can't be fixed." I left her there in that hotel bar, crying into her wine while the blogger typed furiously on her laptop. By evening, the story of Lucas's pattern of targeting married women would be front-page news on every gossip site in the city. The third domino had fallen, but I wasn't done yet. Victor was still out there, probably planning his next move, thinking he could weather the storm and emerge victorious. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. Monday morning brought news that Victor Castellanos had called in sick, the first time in his 15-year career at Meridian Financial that he'd missed a day of work. His absence was particularly notable given that the board was meeting to discuss the results of their expense audit. I sat in my office, reviewing the quarterly reports, when Janine knocked on my door. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. The screen showed Emily's latest Instagram post, a rambling, incoherent rant about corporate conspiracies and powerful men destroying innocent women. She'd filmed it in her hotel room at 3 a.m, clearly drunk, wearing a stained bathrobe and yesterday's makeup. "She's completely lost it," Janine observed. "The comments are savage." She was right. Emily's remaining followers were abandoning her in droves, and the comment section had become a wasteland of mockery and schadenfreude. Her attempt to paint herself as a victim had backfired spectacularly. "Any word from Victor?" I asked. "His assistant says he's got food poisoning, but my sources in accounting tell a different story. Apparently he spent the weekend with his lawyers, trying to figure out how to explain those expense authorizations." I wasn't surprised. Victor had built his career on careful political maneuvering and plausible deniability. Finding himself caught red-handed in a scheme to undermine me had shattered his carefully constructed image. "What's our next move?" Janine asked. Before I could answer, my assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Hamilton, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Detective Morrison." Janine and I exchanged glances. "Morrison?" "Lucas's father," I realized. "Send him in." Detective James Morrison was everything his son wasn't: solid, honest, and clearly disgusted by his offspring's behavior. He was in his mid-50s, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that comes from 30 years of police work. "Mr. Hamilton," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I want to apologize for my son's behavior. What he did was inexcusable." "I appreciate that, Detective, but you're not responsible for Lucas's choices." "Maybe not, but I raised him to be better than this." He pulled out a folder and placed it on my desk. "I've been tracking his activities for the past few years. I thought you should know what you're dealing with." The folder contained police reports, private investigator notes, and financial records that painted a picture of Lucas as a serial predator who targeted wealthy married women. Detective Morrison had been building a case against his own son for fraud and extortion. "He's done this before," the detective explained. "Multiple times. He seduces married women, encourages them to leave their husbands, then blackmails them with compromising photos and videos." "Blackmail?" "He records everything: hotel encounters, private conversations, intimate moments. Then he threatens to release them unless the women pay him to stay quiet." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Has he contacted Emily?" "Not yet, but he will. It's his standard operating procedure. Give it a few more days for her to hit rock bottom, then he'll reach out with an offer to protect her reputation for a price." Detective Morrison's information changed everything. Lucas wasn't just an opportunistic homewrecker. He was a career criminal who'd been using my wife as his latest victim. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know what's coming. When he contacts your wife, she'll probably come to you for money. Don't give it to her. Let him make his demands. Then call me." After Detective Morrison left, I sat in my office thinking about the implications. Emily had thought she was having a sophisticated affair with a charming young man. In reality, she'd been groomed by a predator who was now preparing to extort her. My phone rang. It was Margaret, my lawyer. "Buster, we have a problem. Emily's hired an attorney, David Kellerman. He's expensive and he's good." Kellerman was indeed good. He specialized in high-profile divorces and had a reputation for turning cheating wives into sympathetic victims. If anyone could salvage Emily's position, it was him. What's his angle? Temporary insanity brought on by emotional abuse. He's claiming that your controlling behavior drove Emily to seek comfort elsewhere, and that your public humiliation of her constitutes psychological torture. I laughed despite myself. That's creative. It's also potentially effective. He's planning to paint you as a manipulative corporate bully who destroyed his wife's mental health for revenge. Can he make it stick? In court? Probably not. But in the media? Maybe. He's very good at managing public perception. That afternoon, Kellerman's strategy became clear. Emily appeared on a popular talk show, looking perfectly composed in a conservative dress, her hair styled professionally, her makeup subtle and sympathetic. "I made mistakes," she told the host, her voice quivering with just the right amount of emotion. "But I was trapped in a marriage with a man who controlled every aspect of my life. When I finally found someone who made me feel alive again, I acted impulsively." The host nodded sympathetically. "And your husband's response was to destroy your career and reputation?" Buster is a powerful man with powerful connections. When I tried to leave him, he used those connections to make sure I'd have nothing. No income, no home, no future. It was a masterful performance. Emily had transformed from a cheating wife into a victim of domestic abuse. The studio audience was eating it up. But Kellerman had made one crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that I had connections too, and some of them had very long memories. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Sandra, it's Buster Hamilton. I need a favor." Sandra Chen was the producer of the city's highest-rated morning show, and she owed me a significant favor from a financial deal I'd arranged for her network 3 years earlier. She was also someone who didn't like being lied to on national television. "What do you need?" she asked. "An opportunity to set the record straight, and maybe some background information on Emily's new legal strategy. Consider it done. Can you be here tomorrow morning at 7? "I'll be there." As I hung up the phone, I felt the familiar thrill of a plan coming together. Emily thought she could rewrite history, turn herself from villain to victim with the help of expensive lawyers and media manipulation. She was about to discover that in the game of public relations, I had better connections and a much more compelling story to tell. Tuesday morning's television appearance was scheduled for 7 a.m., but I arrived at the studio at 6 to review my materials with Sandra Chen. The green room was buzzing with activity as makeup artists and producers prepared for the day's shows. "Emily's people have been calling all night," Sandra told me as we reviewed my talking points. "They're threatening to sue if we allow you to make defamatory statements about their client." "Everything I'm going to say is documented fact," I replied, patting the thick folder of evidence I'd brought. Lucas Morrison's criminal history, the expense account fraud, Victor's involvement, it's all backed up with paperwork. Sandra smiled. "That's what I told them. We're journalists, not a public relations firm." The show's format was simple. I'd have 15 minutes to respond to Emily's claims from the previous day, followed by a brief interview about the broader issues of corporate ethics and personal responsibility. What Emily didn't know was that Detective Morrison had agreed to appear via satellite link to discuss his son's criminal activities. At exactly 7 a.m., I walked onto the set and took my seat across from host Jennifer Walsh. The cameras rolled, and Jennifer began with a brief recap of Emily's appearance the previous day. "Your wife painted a picture of a controlling, manipulative husband who destroyed her life out of revenge," Jennifer said. "How do you respond to those allegations?" "With facts," I replied, opening my folder. "Emily claims I controlled every aspect of her life, but the evidence tells a different story. In the past year alone, she spent over $400,000 on personal expenses, designer clothes, luxury vacations, spa treatments, and gifts for her lover." I handed Jennifer a stack of credit card statements. "These are all charges she made without consulting me, using accounts I provided for her personal use." Jennifer flipped through the statements, her eyebrows rising. These are substantial amounts. Emily also claims I destroyed her career out of revenge, but the truth is that she destroyed it herself. Her contract with Meridian Financial included a morality clause that specifically prohibited behavior that would damage the company's reputation. The video of Emily's public infidelity played on the studio monitors, and I watched Jennifer's expression change as she saw the full context of that night's events. This was filmed at a company event in front of our clients and board members, I explained. Emily didn't just cheat on me. She humiliated our entire organization and potentially cost us millions in lost business. But surely her personal life shouldn't affect her professional opportunities, Jennifer said, playing devil's advocate. Normally I'd agree. But Emily's professional opportunities were entirely based on her relationship with me. She was hired as our brand ambassador because she was the wife of a senior executive. When she publicly betrayed that relationship, she eliminated the only qualification she had for the position. The interview continued for another 10 minutes, with me methodically dismantling each of Emily's claims with documented evidence. But the real bombshell came when Detective Morrison appeared on the satellite feed. Detective Morrison, you've been investigating Lucas Morrison, the man at the center of this scandal. Can you tell us what you've discovered? Detective Morrison's weathered face filled the screen as he began describing his son's pattern of targeting wealthy married women. The studio fell silent as he detailed the fraud, extortion, and emotional manipulation that Lucas had perfected over several years. My son is a predator, Detective Morrison said bluntly. He specifically targets vulnerable women in unhappy marriages, convinces them to leave their husbands, then blackmails them with compromising material. Jennifer leaned forward. Are you saying that Emily Hamilton was a victim of this scheme? I'm saying that Emily Hamilton was targeted by a career criminal who saw her as an opportunity for financial gain. Whether she was a willing participant or an unwitting victim is something the courts will have to determine. The interview concluded with Detective Morrison revealing that Lucas had been arrested the previous night on charges of fraud and extortion related to his previous victims. He was currently being held without bail. As I left the studio, my phone was already buzzing with messages. The interview had been devastating to Emily's narrative, and her lawyer David Kellerman was scrambling to do damage control. But the real surprise came that afternoon when Emily herself showed up at my office. She looked terrible. The polished appearance from her television interview was gone, replaced by the disheveled, desperate woman I'd seen at the hotel bar. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook as she sat across from my desk. You destroyed me, she said quietly. No, Emily. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. Lucas is in jail. They're saying he's a criminal, that he was using me. He was using you, just like he used 3 other women before you. Emily's composure finally cracked completely. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal and broken. I lost everything, she whispered. My home, my income, my reputation. I have nothing left. You have your life, I said. That's more than you gave our marriage. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Please, Buster. I'll do anything. I'll disappear, leave New York, never bother you again. Just, please don't let them destroy me completely. For a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. This woman had shared 8 years of my life. We'd had good times together, before the Instagram fame went to her head, and she started believing her own publicity. But then I remembered the look on her face as she kissed Lucas at the company party. The satisfaction in her voice as she announced her infidelity to 200 people. The calculated cruelty of her public betrayal. You made your choice, Emily. Live with the consequences. She stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for any sign of the man who'd once loved her. Finding none, she stood up slowly and walked to the door. I hope you're happy, she said without turning around. I'm satisfied, I replied. That's enough. After she left, I sat in my office watching the sun set over Manhattan. My phone buzzed with a text from Janine. Victor just submitted his resignation, effective immediately. I smiled. The final domino had fallen. 3 months later, I was sitting on the rooftop terrace of my new penthouse apartment, a glass of excellent whiskey in my hand, watching the city lights twinkle below. The divorce had been finalized the previous week, with Emily receiving exactly what the prenuptial agreement specified: nothing. Lucas Morrison was serving 18 months in federal prison for fraud and extortion. Victor Castellanos had taken a position with a small firm in Cleveland, his reputation in Manhattan permanently destroyed. Emily had left New York entirely, last seen working at a retail store in Phoenix under her maiden name. My phone rang. It was Richard Steinberg. Buster, I wanted to personally congratulate you on the Hartwell Foundation deal. $50 million in new assets under management. That's the biggest acquisition we've had all year. Thank you, Richard. It was a team effort. The board is very impressed with how you handled this entire situation. Your professionalism under extreme personal pressure was exemplary. After I hung up, I raised my glass to the glittering city below. Emily had thought she could humiliate me, destroy my reputation, and walk away with half my assets. Instead, she'd handed me the perfect opportunity to eliminate every threat to my position and emerge stronger than ever. In the corporate world, as in life, there's a simple rule. If you're going to take a shot at the king, you'd better not miss. Emily had missed by a mile. I finished my whiskey and went inside to prepare for another day of being exactly who I'd always been. A man who understood that in the game of life, the house always wins when it controls the deck.